The plot continues to thicken, and we have got some very interesting things to come as we move into early next week, especially. Thanks for clicking on to the Saturday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. We have got, of course, the continuing expansion of the cold reservoir within the tropospheric polar vortex. Quite a disconnect, actually, to the stratospheric polar vortex, where it has been near record strong in recent times, but nonetheless, the tropospheric polar vortex remains in expansion mode, as you can see here from this GFS 850 millibar temperature profile. So this is essentially the air mass at 5,000 feet above the Earth's surface, overlooking the pole. And there's a couple of standout things that I want to point out to you. Look at how displaced the cold air is actually. It's quite stretched out. We're seeing it expand and push south over eastern Asia. We've seen the first -40s, for example, in Inner Mongolia, northern China's coldest temperatures of the year so far. We've also seen the first -40s in the last 24 to 48 hours in northern portions of Canada. Even a week ago, we were seeing the coldest temperatures in Alaska, and lo and behold, we're now starting to see the coldest temperatures not only in Europe, but also here across the British Isles. So, yeah, like I say, the plot continues to thicken, and the Arctic oscillation seen by the GFS is actually going to one of the most deepest negatives that we've seen in quite a few months. As you can see here by the chart, we've had episodes of negative, we've had it positive, we've had it negative. We're coming off a positive Arctic oscillation, and we are now going to tank. Now, the North Atlantic oscillation, similar, only it's been more firmly negative, really since the beginning of the middle portion of the summer, really. It's really been negative and remarkably negative right the way through since the middle portion of July all the way till now. We have had a couple of spikes in the positive territory, most notably early September when we had, of course, the record warmth, and also recently, just in the last week or so, we've seen it positive. And when it goes positive, you relate that to warmer than average conditions. But why are we seeing this deep negative AO and NAO? Well, that can, at least in part, be attributed to what's taking place within the tropics here. So if we look at the Manjulian oscillation, first of all, I'll get to this chart here to show you first, because I think it's quite important here to try and show you exactly what's taking place. So we've went from a relatively, innocuous, somewhat inactive phase 8 and 1 of the MJO, so a relatively weak Manjulian oscillation tends to have lesser influence further north or further south away from the tropics. Once you start to see this line expand away from that inner circle, you're increasing the active phase of the MJO, and when you increase the active phase, you then start to see a direct response northwards. And that is exactly what we may be seeing here, because if we look at this chart here, this is the velocity potential anomaly here. And essentially what this is upward motion versus sinking. So where you've got the widespread rising air, you've got increased convection here. So this is the active phase of the MJO over Africa. You notice here that we've got the sinking over the western and central portion of the Pacific. We've got a little area of upward motion here over parts of Indonesia, Malaysia, extending up into Thailand here. But this orientation of upward motion versus sinking is representative of a stronger phase 1 of the MJO. And I've already explained that what this is essentially giving us is going to also take away from us, I think, in the next couple of weeks here, because what you see is the MJO, as we play through this sequence, you can see the eastward progress of the MJO now starting to move away from Africa, over the Indian Ocean, into the maritime continent. Now you've got all this sinking, you've got this suppressed MJO over South America, the central and southern portions of the Atlantic basin here. And what that does is it correlates to a change in the upper air pattern, and I think that is what we're going to see. But that's a way down the road. And instead of telling you about the end game to this, cold spell, which is still to be determined how strong that cold spell is going to become, I might as well explain about the cold as opposed to the end game of that cold. So, like I explained already, Arctic oscillation and the North Atlantic oscillation is going firmly negative here. And what that is going to do is we are going to start to see changes in the upper air pattern. So I'm going to show you this here of the GFS and explain to you a little bit about what's going on within the upper atmosphere, how we're getting to where we are going. You can see here the big negative here over Europe. We've got the strong positive extending from Biscay up the western side of the UK up towards Iceland and Greenland here. We've also got a positive here over northwestern Canada up into Alaska. We've got a bit of a cross-polar flow going on at the moment. We've got very cold conditions over eastern Siberia. That is essentially crossing northwards up over the top and into the eastern half of the United States. But the important thing to remember is these little areas of low pressure over the North Atlantic. Essentially what there are is little wheels that's essentially dictating the movement of and distribution of warm and cold air masses. And we're expanding the cold pool away from the pole into the continents of North America, Asia, and Europe as well. But it's exactly where these areas of low pressure over the Atlantic, as they move towards the UK, both over the course of the next 24 hours, we're going to see one area of low pressure moving towards the UK. What that's going to do is it's essentially going to start to disrupt the area of blocking the warm pool in this general vicinity. So if you watch this loop here, try and make it as clear as possible. You can see this little area of rather innocuous low pressure seen at this scale, of course. Watch what happens as it's moving towards the UK. This little feature right here, as it's moving towards the UK and Ireland, what that's essentially doing is it's forcing this high northwards and hooking up with this or other area of high pressure over central and northern Asia. And this is essentially driving that negative Arctic oscillation. So as it's pushing heat, both these features are pushing heat towards the Arctic region. And what that's doing is it's forcing the draining of cold air southwards as these areas of higher pressure build northwards here. So, of course, this is essentially the seedling to this type of pattern shift. And, of course, it's essentially the pattern that we've seen during July, during August, during late September. Those negative NAO it's like a kind of cycle, if you will, where it continues to repeat itself. And this is essentially a winter version of what we've seen back in July and August with all the tremendous amounts of rain. Remember the amount of blocking we've seen over the North Atlantic to the north of the UK and Ireland. Essentially, this is a winter version of that same type of pattern. And repeating patterns, I think, is a thing. And I think it's certainly interesting to see how this situation is evolving. So look at what's happening. We're seeing the tremendous height rises over the Europe or Eurasia side of the Arctic. And what that's doing is it's essentially opening this door as that high lifts northwards. And we've got this deep feature here, not that far off the North Pole, actually. That's going to be having influence as well. But what this is doing, as we're starting to raise heights, we're starting to warm the atmosphere here at 500 millibars over the Eurasia side of the pole. That's starting to tug on this area of troughiness over eastern North America. But what that's going to do is this trough is then going to slide westwards, and we're also going to see cold air coming in from Greenland here. We've got an area of low pressure moving in. So as we see these areas of low pressure moving in, this is then starting to force the area of high pressure that was pushing kind of northeastwards over the top of northern Scandinavia, what that's going to do is it's now going to start to build the heights further westwards once again. And in turn, as the heights start to build and focus over Greenland, you're then pulling the trough westwards over the continent underneath. So a bit of a complex situation here, but from a meteorological point of view, a very interesting one as well. Given the fact that the stratospheric polar vortex is reasonably strong at the stratospheric level, underneath we're seeing big changes taking place. And I personally believe it's the response of a stronger pulse of the Mann-Julian oscillation over Africa at this moment in time that is then starting to recast the atmosphere and have influenced northward transfer of heat into the Arctic region. And I even sometimes wonder, with the amount of build-up of warmth that we've seen around the planet, is that having an influence on the level of blocking that we're seeing over the Arctic region? Let me know in the comments section below what you think about that. I could be wrong, but I'm always trying to, even though I can't fully understand things, sometimes I'm always trying to find out why certain things are taking place. But as you can see here, by the time we reach Friday, the end of this week, we've got areas of low pressure moving in across the southern storm track. We've got a world of cold air trapped between northern Africa, essentially, Greenland, extending over the top of Europe here. We've got this very deep trough. This would be a tremendous pattern as we move into the heart of the winter season here. So we'll watch this space. It's happening now. Talking about repeating patterns, are we going to see this coming back in a number of weeks as well? I believe it will happen. I do think that we are going to get a pullback, and we may see a surge of significant mild weather as we move towards the middle portion of December, like we've seen back in early September, like we've seen just a week or so ago. We had temperatures 16 in England, we had 13, 14 Celsius in Scotland. Mild conditions replaced by the cold conditions. Do we see mild conditions coming back as we move towards the end of week 1 into week 2 of December, and then we start to see the wheels turning once again here? Possible influence of the Indian Ocean dipole, El Nino. This is not a normal El Nino. Yeah, it might be a strong El Nino on the surface, but the atmosphere is responding very differently. We've got, of course, a much warmer general overview of the planet, ocean-wise, atmosphere-wise, so things can be correlated the same as what you would have done back, say, 10, 15 years ago. This El Nino was a very different beast compared to what we've seen in recent times. Indian Ocean dipole, of course, we had that very strong one in 2019, attributed potentially to the super strong polar vortex, but we didn't have the El Nino. We didn't have other aspects as well. We didn't have an East QBO, for example. So not one thing can be attributed, but this is a fascinating situation. As we continue to play through this loop, you watch what happens. As you can see, it starts to break apart. We're starting to raise heights over western portions of Europe in response, by the way, to the MJO pushing eastwards across the Indian Ocean towards the continental maritime region. And eventually what happens is we start to see the Atlantic open up. Could we see a significant spell of wet and windy conditions mid-month? Watch this space. I've said it here. We'll see if that materializes. By the way, look at this. Snow prospects for not only Europe here. Look at that there. A bit of a glacier developed here over Europe. But look at the UK. Some significant snow cover potential as we move towards the early portions of December here. So fascinating stuff. Keep it right here on marfoganweather.com and YouTube. If you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button. We're going to look in detail at snow prospects for next week. Still all to play for. Models still really struggling. They're here, they're there, they're chopping, they're changing. We will continue to watch this space as we go forward here. So stay tuned. Like I say, global weather report coming up tomorrow. So plenty of things going on around the world as always. And I encourage you to check that out tomorrow. But we will be looking at this in significant detail as we go through the next few days. Exciting times to come, folks. Stay tuned. See you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.